You know what's crazy? You have the New York Times bailing out Pete Hegseth over the Washington Post. I know we live in crazy, crazy freaking times. This came up today during the cabinet meeting as well, and it's nuts. Remember the Washington Post basically said that Pete Hegseth said, kill them all, which kind of comes from, it's like, like a movie, like kill them all. But it's not true. It didn't happen. So they published the boat strike story a week after Mark Kelly and company released the video about the illegal orders. Right, so the video comes out last week. You remember, obviously, the Democrats, we talked about this over and over again last week or the week before. And as I was saying, they couldn't cite an example of an illegal order that was given. Okay. They have these boat strikes. Now, the idea is that there's survivors and that the order is given to kill the survivors, all right, which violates all kinds of international treaties, et cetera, et cetera. So the Washington Post writes this big story up about this and says, hey, you know what? Pete Hegseth, kill them all. So you have the New York Times now, which is basically playing cleanup for what the Washington Post was writing about Pete Hegseth and saying that Hegseth's directive did not specifically address what should happen if a first missile turned out not to fully accomplish the mission, and the official said his order was not a response to surveillance footage showing that at least 2 people on their boat survived the first blast. Okay? Because that's the heart of it, was the whole thing about kill them all. And Hegseth brought this up today and called it fake news and said it's ridiculous. Now, if you're going to give an order like that, kill them all, you're going to own it. Because you're gonna say, yeah, we want to kill all these people, so kill them all. I don't care. Let the chips fall where they may. But that's not what's happening here. That's not what he's saying. One of the officials said the U.S. military intercepted radio communications from one of the survivors to what the officials said were narco-traffickers. So the big headline, which said kill them all, suggesting a follow-up strike to eliminate survivors, is inaccurate. All right. And this came up again during the cabinet meeting today because the media is obsessed with this. They smell blood in the water. No pun intended. So why don't we begin with the secretary with cut number 6, actually, from the cabinet meeting today, talking about we've just begun with this. Now, this is why I say Congress should give authorization to this, because this is not going to end and not going to stop. So, if you're looking to debate whether or not the U.S. should be doing this, that's over. We're doing this. The government's doing this, period. Now just give the president all the legal authorization so you don't have to worry about anything down the road. And because, like I said, you've got Republicans and Democrats now who are concerned because they see the Washington Post headline and they go, oh, kill them all. Now, there was never a problem when Barack Obama said kill them all about American citizens on foreign land. That never happened. There was never any concern with that. Never. 4, by my count. 4. And literally, it was kill them all because the order was a kill order. Like, let's understand something. In the game of, and this is not whataboutism, in the game of presidential orders, it wasn't like Obama said, drone strike that house. And then if there happen to be American citizens in there who we believe are terrorists, well then, so be it. They shouldn't have been there. He literally signed a presidential memorandum authorizing their death, okay? Authorizing their death. Not authorizing hey, we're going to go blow up a farm if they happen to be there with some goats and some sheep having some fun. Well, that's on them. No. He signed their death warrants. Now, in my opinion, this is still incredibly controversial. Does the president have the ability to do this? Well, the president's legal team wrote a big memorandum justifying his use of doing it. In fact, after that, they came up with all kinds of kill lists. And it was all under the umbrella of the war on terror. So going back to Congress's authorization they gave to President Bush, which never really ever ended, they're saying, well, we have this authorization so we can do anything we want. We've designated these people to be terrorists and therefore we can kill them. Nobody cared. No, some people cared. I mean, I would say nobody cared, but I mean, the media didn't care. The Democrats didn't care. The ACLU may have cared back then. I don't know, but you get my point. Not just saying like blow up a carnival, but execute. Kill these people. Kill them all. That's literally Barack Obama's order. Kill them all. But apparently it was not Pete Hegseth's order, even though the Washington Post ran that headline. And then we spent a lot of time going on about the ins and outs of whether or not, if there are survivors, can they be killed? And it turns out that this idea that they saw that there were survivors and then said, kill them all, is a lie. Okay? So here's the Secretary, Pete Hegseth, cut number 6.
And then it's getting after and going after narco-terrorists and designated terrorist organizations in our own hemisphere. As I've said, and I'll say again, we've only just begun striking narco boats and putting narco-terrorists at the bottom of the ocean because they've been poisoning the American people. And Joe Biden tried to approach it with kid gloves and allowed them to come across the border, cartels take over community, 20 million people, hundreds of thousands of Americans poisoned. And President Trump said, no, we're taking the gloves off. We're taking the fight to these designated terror organizations. And that's exactly what we're doing. So we're stopping the drugs, we're striking the boats, we're defeating narco-terrorists, and we're standing...
And you may say one thing, that drugs coming in through the sea by sea are down 91%. And I don't know who the 9% is.
I'm not sure either, sir.
But down 91% by sea.
Okay, so that's a little context for you of what they're doing. All right, and the president says he wants these boats taken out. That's what's going to happen. That's what's going to continue to happen. This is the Trump doctrine. We've talked about this before with Dr. Victoria Coates. It's very similar to the Monroe Doctrine. This is our hemisphere, and we're going to take care of this. These are terrorists. The administration has designated them terrorists. And they argue then they have the power to designate them as terrorists, and then under existing law, they have the power to take them out. My opinion, it's cleaner just to have Congress pass a completely full new resolution, but in the meantime, this is what they're doing. And it doesn't seem like there are a lot of people within the American people writ large that are objecting to this. However, that could change if you have more instances where you get situations like, did they execute these survivors? No, they didn't, but that's the kind of stuff you got to worry about. Now, remember, if there's an authorization for use of force, well, that changes everything. How do I know? Because I'm looking at the precedent of when Barack Obama was literally signing freaking death warrants. Like a mob boss. Kill them. Kill them all 4 of them. Kill them. Whack them. Not drone strike that area, and if they happen to be there, like, oops. No. I'm signing this guy's death warrant. Not even a trial in absentia. Just, I have the right to order these people dead. I have the right to order their deaths. Think about that. Now, we're not having this conversation right now about authorizing the deaths of these drug boats because we have determined under the law, for the most part, that this is criminal activity, not terrorism, not military activity. The administration is saying it is terrorism. It is narco-terrorism. It is terrorism activity. I'm telling you, deal with the ambiguity of this with a congressional resolution. Because then the president can do anything he wants. Obama was drone striking weddings. I think they killed like 180 people in Pakistan at one wedding. Nobody cared. Nobody cared. You know what I mean? War on terror. What are you going to do? Signing freaking death warrants. They would have a guy and they would say, we got him. All right, go kill him. And they would just kill them all. And nobody cared. The only reason why they're even making a big deal about this now is because of this legal ambiguity, because of this issue of question of whether or not this is criminal activity or this is military activity. And if it's criminal, then you obviously have to follow the Constitution and due process and everything else. If it's military, not so much. The argument the administration is making is that this is international waters, but within our hemisphere. I'm telling you, you are just asking for constitutional problems. Just have Congress pass a freaking resolution and move on with it, because if this is what you're going to do, then at least cover your bases with Congress. The advice I'm giving here is very sound, by the way. Very sound advice. Anyway, here's the president on this point, cut 7.
To me, it was an attack. It wasn't 1 strike, 2 strikes, 3 strikes. Somebody asked me a question about the second strike. I didn't know about the second strike. I didn't know anything about people. I wasn't involved in it. I knew they took out a boat. But I would say this, they had a strike. I hear the gentleman that was in charge of that is extraordinary. He's an extraordinary person. I'll let Pete speak about him. But Pete was satisfied. Pete didn't know about second attack having to do with two people, and I guess Pete would have to speak to it. I can say this: I want those boats taken out, and if we have to, we'll attack on land also, just like we attack on sea. And there's very little coming in by sea. I think we've knocked out over 90% of it. There's very little, and I understand.
See, that's what I'm talking about. All right, that's what I'm talking about. They're going to keep doing it. Do it, then cover your bases constitutionally, and you just follow the rule book. Very simple. But this issue of, oh, there were survivors, like clinging to a boat, and the Secretary of War turned around and said, kill them all, kill them all. Not true. So the Secretary said that the Admiral made the decision to ultimately sink the boat. Again, if you're getting into the area here where you're using the military in what has in the past been considered to be a criminal issue, then give the commander-in-chief the authorization. I know it sounds like I'm saying something that should be like, well, doesn't he already have it? Well, I don't know. That's the question. That's the ambiguity. That's where you're going to get into what the potential congressional hearings down the road. But here's what the Secretary said regarding the Admiral's decision here, cut number 8.
Al-Qaeda and ISIS, do you arrest them and treat them, pat them on the head and say, don't do that again? Or do you end the problem directly by taking a lethal, kinetic approach? And that's the way President Trump has authorized the War Department to look at these cartels. And I wish everybody could be in the room watching our professionals like Mitch Bradley, Admiral Mitch Bradley, and others at JSOC and SOCOM and other commanders. The deliberative process, the detail, the rigorous, the intel, the legal, the evidence-based way that we're able to, with sources and methods that we can't reveal here, that make sure that every one of those drug boats is tied to a designated terrorist organization. We know who's on it, what they're doing, what they're carrying. All these white bales are not Christmas gifts from Santa. This is drugs running on 4-motor fast boats or submarines that we've also struck. No one's fishing on a submarine. And I have empowered them to make that call. Now, the first couple of strikes, as you would, as any leader would want, you want to own that responsibility. So I said, I'm going to be the one to make the call after getting all the information and make sure it's the right strike. That was September 2nd. There's a lot of intelligence that goes into that, building that case and understanding that, a lot of people providing information. I watched that first strike live. As you can imagine, at the Department of War, we got a lot of things to do. So I didn't stick around for the hour and 2 hours, whatever, where all the sensitive site exploitation digitally occurs. So I moved on to my next meeting. A couple of hours later, I learned that that commander had made which he had the complete authority to do, and by the way, Admiral Bradley made the correct decision to ultimately sink the boat and eliminate the threat. He sunk the boat, and eliminated the threat. And he was the right call. We have his back. And the American people are safer because narco-terrorists know you can't bring drugs through the water and eventually on land if necessary to the American people. We will eliminate that threat, and we're proud to do it.
If you're wondering, too, the line of the movie, I couldn't think of it as Hook. Yeah, no, they made a movie about an adult Peter Pan. Robin Williams, Dustin Hoffman. Neither of them, this was their finest hour. But my kids were in a Peter Pan thing. Claire was in Peter Pan. She wanted to see it. We watched it. But there's a point where Captain Hook, played by Dustin Hoffman, says, kill them. Kill them all. I mean, there are worse movies, but anyway, I digress. The point is that was not, kill them all was not given. And Hegseth said that. Like, and you got the fake media with they're coming out and saying, kill them all, and it didn't happen. And here is U.S. Department of Defense Press Secretary Kingsley Wilson during a briefing today, talking about the Washington Post publishing something that is false and how the New York Times, of all people, of all entities, coming in to set the record straight here on this, cut 10.
Yes, Wade.
So you were speaking earlier about the Washington Post report concerning the Secretary of War and Admiral Bradley. And my question is, does the Department of War plan on pursuing any sort of legal action against the Washington Post? And what consequences will there be for lying to the American people? Because, of course, the implication there was that Pete Hegseth and Admiral Bradley are war criminals. And that was the implication, and that's what a lot of people on social media were saying after the fact. So could you speak to that?
Yeah, it is frankly disgusting that the Washington Post would publish something that is so insanely false. And we've seen this from the mainstream media before, right? Anonymous sources that are being quoted that probably have no idea what's going on. And the Washington Post actually went so far as to falsely attribute a quote to the Secretary of War, that he never said. That is preposterous that they would write that and pass that off as true journalism. Thankfully, the New York Times stepped in and corrected the record and let the American people know that what they were publishing was absolutely fake news. So the Washington Post, I think readership should think twice before reading that outlet again. It is disgraceful that they call themselves journalists, and we told them as such, right? We get press queries like we do from all of you. We told them this story was completely fake news on Thanksgiving evening with a 3-hour deadline, and they still published it anyway. It's disgraceful, but thankfully the American people see through it.
You got the New York Times correcting the record of the Washington Post. That's how freaking insane times we live in, by the way. If you're ever just wondering how freaking insane the times we live in, it's that. It's the best example I can give you, is that. Now, Jack Sobiek, our buddy, who Poso, has been on the show many times, as you know, former WPHT Employee of the Year. He asked a question today at the Defense Department briefing. This is cut number 11.
Follow up, you mentioned working with partners on the Hill. Another senator on the Hill, the Democrat side, is Senator Mark Kelly. Now, we heard some reporting about a possible investigation into him regarding his status as a retired member of the United States Navy, still on pension, and therefore still under the jurisdiction of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And as such, his membership, you mentioned the seditious six, would that be grounds for possibly bringing him back to active service for an investigation, for NJP, or even a full court martial?
So you're correct. The Department of War received serious allegations of misconduct against Senator Mark Kelly, and in accordance with the Uniform Code of Military Justice and other applicable recommendations and regulations, we're doing a thorough review of all of these allegations. And the Secretary of War has tasked the Secretary of the Navy, John Phelan, with doing a thorough review, looking into all of these allegations and providing him an update on December 10th. So we will have more information to come on that. But I would just add that this despicable video that Mark Kelly participated in with the seditious six was a politically motivated influence operation that was an attempt to undermine the chain of command, to sow distrust and division in our armed forces. That is absolutely ridiculous, and it puts our warfighters at risk. And again, he doubled down on the Sunday shows. I don't know if you all saw him on the Sunday shows, but he basically insinuated that service members who do not defy President Trump's orders could face potential prosecution in the future when Democrats are back in power. He even called our troops and likened them to those of the Russian military. This is totally disgraceful from an elected official, and the department takes it very seriously, and that is why we have launched this review.
I was talking last week when I was in New York. I did Fela's show on Monday's radio show, and I did on Tuesday. I popped in when Paul Morrow was hosting, and Paul's a former NYPD captain, and we were having this whole conversation about the time that Anwar al-Awlaki was killed, the American suspected terrorist. Obama signed his death warrant. There was another guy who was killed in these drone strikes, who was somebody that the NYPD had wanted. His name was Samir Khan. Now, the thing about Samir Khan is that he was an American citizen. He had been publishing all these how to make a bomb things, and they wanted him. And ultimately, the NYPD calls up the FBI, and the FBI is like, we're on it, we got it, and nothing ever happened. And he wound up leaving the United States and going to Afghanistan, Pakistan, wherever the hell he was, right? He was one of the Americans killed. Now, apparently, he was not intentionally targeted. Anwar al-Awlaki, who was American, also American citizen, was intentionally targeted. The whole thing is that this guy, Samir Khan, was with him. So Paul Moore was telling me the story about this last week, and I was fascinated by it because, al-Awlaki's name Samir Khan, not so much. Now, my theory on this is that and his theory too, is they knew exactly where he was going to be. They wanted him killed. They wanted but they didn't have the exact goods on him like they had with al-Awlaki. So they wanted to make it a little bit more, obscure. Like, well, he was caught in the crossfire kind of a thing. But nobody really believes that. They really believe that he was targeted. And that it was 100% they wanted to take him out. But they just kind of wanted to use a little bit of cover on that whole thing. This guy, the other guy. Now, as you know, this all happened under Barack Obama. Families of Anwar al-Awlaki and Abdulrahman al-Awlaki and Samir Khan did sue Obama officials, including the president, Leon Panetta, David Petraeus, and others. The lawsuits were dismissed by federal courts. Judges held that matters involving national security, targeted killing, and military operations were not judicially reviewable. So that is the precedent here that I think the administration would be wise to follow in these matters and take it from being a criminal matter into being a military matter. You also get the added benefit of, there are going to be Democrats that will stand up and give speeches on the floor of the House that are going to be viewed as defending drug dealers and narco drug providers and other people like that. So you get a double win. I mean, if you're going to do it anyway, you might as well. Right? You're going to do it anyway. You might as well. Then you just remove the legal ambiguity. And this is something, again, I was talking about with Paul Morrow. So maybe you heard the show. I don't know. Paul was filling in for Jimmy on Tuesday. I filled in for him last Monday. Paul came on with me, and then I went on with Paul. And we talked about both of these subjects in the course of this because his expertise in this I thought was very, very interesting. And this was also at the time that the video had just come out. The video of Mark Kelly and the others had just come out. And the thing about it is that when they were all saying over and over again, you don't have to follow the legal order. You don't have to follow the legal order. We kept saying, what? Give us an example of one. And we played that idiot congressman from Colorado, that Jason Crow, who couldn't name a single thing. The guy brings up freaking Vietnam. And this is when we talked about plungers up rectums. He brings up Abu Ghraib. Not anything. And then what? Within a week, not even a week, they have this whole story about Pete Hegseth saying, kill them all, of these survivors of this boat. And they're saying how this violates treaties and how this violates maritime law and international law, and it violates the United States, our own laws and our own rules and everything like this. But none of this was ever an issue when Obama was signing death warrants and blowing up American citizens. Like, these aren't even Americans. But none of this was ever an issue in the past, in the back. So... yeah, and the boat strike happened. Thank you, Matt, for the clarification. Yeah, September 2nd. So the timing of this, they always have a plan. There always is, like I always tell you, they're like 7 steps ahead sometimes in what they're doing. It's like the boat strike happened. They put out this video. Everybody's like, why are you putting out this video? What's up with the video? What's up? What are legal orders? And then the story breaks. For the Washington Post writes a story and says, Pete Hegseth gave this order, kill them all, which turns out to be a fugazi. But you understand the coordination. And this is something we've also talked about on the show for many years, which is this revolving door between people in the media and people within the military-industrial complex. That's why so many of them wind up leaving their jobs in government and either serving on boards of corporations, which also own media conglomerates nowadays, or they become media spokespeople. But this revolving door of, I scratch your back, you scratch my back, I give you a story, you write the story I want you to write. And this happens over and over again. Something we have talked about on the show many, many times over the years. See, you do learn a lot from paying attention and listening to the show.